When you get elevated to a high, big-time position, whether elected, appointed, or selected, immediately do two things. Number one, become the most humble form of yourself. And two, practice faith daily. If you do these two things, you will realize the true power of your position. Now let me start with my first recommendation. Be humble. That might sound strange to you. You might ask yourself, well, why should I be humble? I'm in this big position. I'm the boss. I have to show strength. I got to be a leader. Webster's defines the word humble as reflecting, expressing, or offered in a spirit of deference or submission. So you might really be scratching your head. How can I be both powerful and submissive? Being a candidate is a very humbling experience. Whether you're running for office or being interviewed, you are trying to figure out how to be your best self, how to convince others to give you a chance, and ultimately, it is not your decision, it is theirs. You have to submit to someone else's will. Whether it's voters, like in my case, or board of directors, or a hiring manager. So if you got your big time position by practicing humility, why do you think you have to change? It is often our ego that tells us that we have to show others how powerful we are. But it is our faith that teaches us that true power is omnipresent. Now I want to discuss faith. Faith means complete trust or confidence in someone or something, like a higher power. For me, my faith lies in the teachings of God. So whether you practice a specific religion, or you are spiritual, or you believe that there are forces out there in the universe giving you signs and directing your steps, follow them, practice faith. See, when you get in a big time position, you are expected to do big things. And it will be hard. Others will doubt you. You will be criticized. You will be challenged. But your humility will keep you grounded. And your faith will keep you moving forward. When I became state's attorney, my first big challenge to my faith came in the first month of office. I was meeting with the parents of a young, handsome, intelligent, honorable young man who was viciously killed by a white supremacist. It was, I knew, going to be the defining case of my first term. When I first met with the parents of this amazing young man, they were skeptical. They felt that they were not being heard by the prior administration. They didn't know this, but I had already changed the prosecutors on their case. However, they wanted to tell me that day that they had some concerns, that they were unsure, that they doubted how committed we were to getting justice. Instead of me, with my ego, saying to them, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, I am going to show you that I'm in charge and things will be different. Instead of me saying that to them, I decided to be quiet and just listen to them. because I knew that my faith was telling me I would have a chance to prove it. Jury selection was set on a Monday. The day before, I received a call from my lead prosecutor advising that the defendant wanted to take a plea. And that happens sometimes. And we always have to consider the plea, talk to the victims or their next of kin about the plea, and make a decision on whether or not that's the right decision in this case. And in this case, we did have a really great plea deal with conditions that were favorable to the state. However, something inside me said that this was a case that had to be tried. So even though everyone was in agreement that they could live with the deal that was presented, I said I needed some time. I went to my office. I sat by myself. I turned open the holy book and just really turned to random pages to see whether or not I was going to get a sign about what I should do. I then looked at a picture of the victim, which I keep on my desk to this day. And a still small voice inside told me that this was a case that needed to be tried. So I called my prosecutors in and I said, go try the case. The decision was final, and it was my decision. During the trial, my attorneys handled the case expertly. The openings, the closings, the direct examinations, the cross. No trial is easy, and no trial is perfect, but it seemed effortless. That's not to say opposing counsel didn't do a great job, and that's not to say that the trial was out without disappointments. In fact, we lost one of the lesser counts before the jury could even consider it. And that count was important because it was a count about it being a hate crime. And so it was disappointing, but I knew that the decision was the right decision. The victim's mother had doubt when that happened, when that count was dismissed, that justice would be served. I knelt before her in the courtroom. I held her hand and looked into her eyes and said, trust me, this is going to be fine. And you know what? It was. The jury returned a guilty verdict on the top count of first-degree murder, and the defendant was later ordered to serve a life sentence. Justice was served. And what was more, that I had a testimony about staying the course, making bold decisions, believing, trusting, humbling myself to my faith. I felt good. I felt finally I had realized the power of my position. But I was wrong. A few months later, I was with the parents, and they were talking before an audience, and they talked about their experiences surrounding this entire trial and the loss of their son. They talked about losing faith and gaining it again. The mother talked about when I looked into her eyes in the courtroom, and she said that at that moment she needed to just let go and believe in the power of the justice system. I began to have an overwhelming feeling and a new understanding. See, the true power of the position that I was holding wasn't about me having a testimony about my faith. The greater power was about the strength of my faith and its ability through that strength to give someone else the ability to have a testimony. The courthouse is an interesting place. There are people who come seeking justice and others who come seeking mercy. On the exact same day that I waited for a verdict in the case I just described, and in the exact same courtroom, there was another young man who had a hearing. He had received a life sentence 29 years earlier for a horrific crime. He was 16 years old. He had grown up in prison. Several months earlier, I stood as the chief prosecutor in my jurisdiction. I stood up and I asked the court to give this young man a second chance. The judge looked at him and said, no other prosecutor in the state would do this. She's taking a big risk on you. You need, if you get this opportunity, make the most of it and pay it forward. On that day, he had completed the first phase of the reentry process and was being released on home monitor. And he could be with his family for the first time in nearly 3 decades. When I had a chance to talk to him, I asked if he ever thought this day would come. He said that when I got elected, he and his fellow inmates were watching a news segment where I was being interviewed. During that interview, I said that I would be willing to review sentences that were unfair or disproportionate, and that I'm willing to give people a second chance. He said that that was the first time in his adult life, in his fellow inmates' adult lives, that they had hope that they would not die in prison. Now, when someone says that to you, it is incredibly humbling that your faith is so strong, so solid, and that by submitting to it, you give someone else hope. That is true power. I want to leave you with this thought. Whatever position you hold, whether it's the chief prosecutor, CEO, manager, director, or employee, it's really just a title. It is what you do with the position that gives that position meaning and power. And if you stay humble and submissive to your faith, you will not only have a testimony about your achievements, but you will cause someone else to have a testimony. And that's when you know that you have achieved power. Thank you.